Hello and welcome to Panel 7, Reaching the Market, Distribution in the Digital Age. A topic so big that it actually warrants 2 panels. There's another one with the same name tomorrow afternoon. So if you like this one, that'll be a good one to go to as well. My name is Dustin Morrow, and I'm an assistant professor in the film program at Portland State University. I teach digital film and new media production. So this panel is very interesting to me. We'll be hearing from Jin Lee of the University of Iowa with a presentation called An Inconvenient Truth About App TV. Melanie Conan from Georgia Institute of Technology with a presentation called Everything New is Old Again, Normalizing the Production and Distribution of Web-Based Television. Matt Cohen, also of the greatest school in the country, the University of Iowa. Go Hawkeyes. The difficulty of endorsing the television anywhere, anytime campaign, the case of TimeWarner and the TWCableTV app. And finally, Michael Holmes of Ball State University, Sheree Josephson of Weber State University, and Jacqueline Martinsen of Ball State University with second screen TV applications, Boon or Boondoggle. So I will turn it over now to Jin Lee of the University of Iowa.
Just for clarification, University of Queensland is not in New Zealand, it's in Australia. So with that said. So my presentation is actually based on a paper that Mark Andrejevic and I are currently working on. And we decided to work on this project when we started to hear a lot of stories about how iPad has to... have the sound on, I think. Oh. Yep.
It's on.
It's on. I just need to... Thank you. Thanks. We started to work on this project when we started to hear a lot of stories about how iPad, as the top-notch on-the-go entertainment device, could fulfill the promises of freedom and control of anytime, anything, anytime, anywhere TV that Nicholas Negroponte talked about more than a decade ago in Being Digital. iPad was also being talked about as a good alternative to cable and satellite TV, and that was kind of interesting, and it was the moment when a lot of news were coming out about how people were using their iPads to watch TV, and also a lot of stories on the development of apps that are specifically for watching television were starting to come out. And recently, New York Times had an article about young people's preference of tablet devices over big screen television and watching TV. Also kind of, I think, adds something to this project. So why do people watch television on iPad? Oh. That's not it. Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay, so why do people watch TV on iPad? First of all, it has a 9.7-inch screen. It's not big, but it's not small. It has a long battery life. It's portable. It provides a more intimate and private TV viewing experience. And because you hold the device close when you're watching it, it provides a larger field of view than TV, which requires you to sit across the room. So with the steady stream of developments in new apps that allow users to watch TV and the increasing number of sales of iPads, the number of people who use iPad to watch TV will only likely to increase. So I'm going to talk briefly about the app model, the new monetization model, before I talk about the development of TV apps. Apps which do not involve iTunes, where contents need to be individually purchased and downloaded, have come to provide a new monetization model for media content owners, especially since the release of iPad in early 2010. And it's largely due to Apple's decision not to integrate Adobe Flash technology that runs 75% of videos seen on the web to iPad. When Apple first introduced iPad, Adobe's Flash software was the biggest point of contention in negotiations between Steve Jobs and the big media companies. These media companies pointed out the heavy cost of reformatting their videos and refused to retool their extensive video libraries to accommodate iPad. But the real reason that media companies were hesitant to distribute their content on iPad was because they haven't figured out how to monetize their content with the new device or with the new app model. business model. But since the initial skepticism and naysaying, many media companies have hopped on the iPad bandwagon in the past year and have started to provide television streaming service using Apple's consumer-friendly app model. As media companies are beginning to see the revenue-generating potential of apps over websites, media companies are opting to push their best and their timely content via their apps rather than web. To this phenomenon, media guru Michael Hirshhorn wrote a couple years ago in Atlantic that the shift of the digital frontier from the web, where browser rules supreme, to smartphone and tablets, where the app and pricing plan hold sway, signals a radical shift from openness to a degree of closeness. So the gradual replacement of websites with apps for TV streaming and distribution, first of all, challenges the notion that television content should be a freely accessible public good. And I know this is more of a long-held belief than practice in the US. And second of all, it also challenges the notion that new technologies have both liberated the place-based and domestic nature of television use and freed viewers to control when and where they view programs, or what Philip Napoli would call audience autonomy. So what we mean by app TV is, first, we only looked into apps that directly stream live television or on-demand episodes. And we excluded apps that require additional devices or software, as well as apps, the television companion or co-viewing apps that integrate social media, which are mostly known as the second screen apps in our study. And we divided the apps depending on how the contents are being distributed or how the apps operate. In the first, into 5 different categories. And the first one is the network TV apps. And these apps use the ad-supported model, and they allow you to access the 5 latest episodes, full episodes, for free. ABC was the first to really allow users to use iPad to watch TV. They had, the moment iPad was released, ABC had an app called ABC Player. And it's largely due to the fact that Steve Jobs was the largest shareholder of Disney, which owns ABC, of course. NBC held out for a long time, and then released this app where people can watch their popular shows such as 30 Rock, Parks and Recreations, and all that for free last year. CBS doesn't have an app, but it has its videos iPad compatible, so you can access it when you use your iPad through Safari, but it only allows access to short clips, not full episodes. And Fox doesn't have an app, and it doesn't have any iPad compatible videos, so it's the only network that does not make any of its contents iPad compatible. The second category would be the cable provider TV app. And many cable and satellite providers have recently created their own apps to allow their subscribers to use iPad to stream live or on-demand TV. So the companies that have their own apps, the cable operators that have their own apps are TimeWarner Cable, Cox, Cablevision, DirecTV. Dish Network also has one, but it requires Sling, so it requires an additional device, so that's, we didn't really look into that. But the characteristics of these apps is that you can only watch live feed, and you can only use the service at home. So there is a limitation to these apps to become the anywhere, anytime, to become an anytime, anywhere TV. Comcast has an app called Xfinity TV, and you can use the service outside the home. But the limitation is you can only access on-demand contents, not free, not live content, not live feed. And but early this year, Comcast did announce that it's going to start a new service where you can access live feed, but you will require Comcast a set-top box called AnyPlay, and you can only use that service at home. So it's not really going to be different from the other cable operators' apps. So there's a limitations to these apps to really make iPad to become the AAA TV that Negroponte and many other technologists have celebrated as the future of TV. Times' Harry McCracken points out that the problem is more of a business model issue than a technical problem. Content owners are so used to the decades-old business model of being paid by big distributor companies for the content that they tend to feel uncomfortable towards any system that veers away from it. Even distributing content on the internet is scary for many to this day. The fear that the content owners have towards alternative business model was well reflected in the strenuous battle between cable providers, mostly Cablevision and TimeWarner Cable, and content owners, mostly Viacom, Fox, and Discovery, that has had a significant impact on what consumers can watch on their iPad device. I think we're going to have a presentation on that topic particularly, so I'm not going to go more on that. The next one is the single channel TV apps. While battles between the cable providers and cable content owners were going on, some cable channels went their own way and created their own individual TV apps, hoping to have more control over how their content is viewed online and other connected devices. Some of the networks that have their own app are CNN and ESPN, which allow you to access live streams, HBO, TBS, TNT, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, all have their own apps which allow you to access their on-demand content. So when these apps started to come out, a lot of people were kind of thinking, well, isn't this a good reason to cut the cord to stop subscribing to cable TV? Forbes' Brian Solomon argued that the single-channel apps provide a better experience than cable operators' apps because, first of all, you can use it outside the home, and because it can provide a different kind, it can break up the cable pricing monopoly. He said, if every channel has its own app, users could pay a la carte for content, a few dollars at a time, rather than shelling big bucks for hundreds of stations that they never watch. But the problem is, these apps didn't provide a reason to cut the cord because these apps operate under the TV Everywhere initiative. TV Everywhere initiative came out as a strategy by major media conglomerates and big cable satellite operators to protect cable TV from the ravages of the online TV. TV Everywhere strategy emerged as cable operators and cable networks began to feel threatened by the possibility of the loss of cable TV subscribers due to free contents on the internet. Saving cable TV became an imperative for media conglomerates and cable operators, not only because of the possibility of cord cutting, but also to make sure that the younger generation coming up will continue to buy into the idea of cable TV. TV Everywhere is an industry-wide agreement to make sure that only those who pay for a cable TV subscription can watch cable TV programming on the internet and other devices. The industry has come to believe that the best way to preserve the revenue stream and business model of subscription TV is through user authentication. The authentication model offers cable shows online for free as long as the viewer is first authenticated as a subscriber to a cable or satellite service. So this is a HBO Go app. When you try to watch their full episodes, what it's going to require you to do is to first choose the cable or satellite operator that you subscribe to, and then to log in with information that your cable or satellite company is giving you. But the problem is, not the only one, the problem is you can subscribe to cable or to satellite but not be able to access it if your cable company is not one of the participating companies for these services. So for instance, I subscribe to Mediacom, which is the biggest cable company in the Midwest. I don't know if in the Midwest, but in Iowa for sure. But Mediacom isn't a participating company, so even though I subscribe to cable, I can't use any of the services that I've mentioned. So the main issue of TV Everywhere is that TV shows that are available online for free must go behind a paywall. It is within the context of the industry-led TV Everywhere initiative that single-channel app TV must be understood. Next one is the subscription-based app TV, and the leading service providers are Netflix and Hulu Plus, and then there's Amazon VOD as well. But these apps allow you to watch programming of your choice as long as you pay the monthly fee for a monthly subscription fee. Whoa. Okay. This is crazy. Okay. So cable operators considered these services to be the culprit of cord cutting, and that's where the TV Everywhere initiative really started to develop because of these services. And also Netflix CEO recently talked about how TV Everywhere is more of a threat to Netflix than other services that operate on a similar business model, like Hulu Plus or Amazon VOD. So even though Hulu and Netflix might have freed television from the tyranny of TV set, they haven't brought an end to pay TV. Instead, they have contributed in establishing the notion that watching television now comes with a price. There are other apps that don't really fit into the categories that I mentioned. HGTV has its own app with limited selection of shows. It's not updated that frequently. PBS has one, and Bloomberg just recently started a free live streaming. And the reason why they're providing it for free, unlike CNN or ESPN, is quite interesting, and I don't think I have time to talk about it, but if somebody asks, I'll tell you later. So where is App TV going? Well, it seems like TV Everywhere is being further implemented. Comcast just a couple of weeks ago announced that it's starting a new service called Xfinity StreamPix for its premium subscribers, and it's going to allow them wider content, and it's going to really challenge Netflix, or at least that's what the media people, industry people think. And what's also going to happen if TV Everywhere becomes further implemented is, according to Interpret, which is a media research group, is that you can leave out 7.7 million viewers, and that's 11% of active online video streamers who do not subscribe to cable or satellite service from accessing TV programs online. So the people who's going to be most affected by TV Everywhere is going to be the group. It's going to be those in the lower average income bracket and young adults in the 18 to 34 demographic who prefer streaming video online than to pay for cable or satellite service. Another thing that Interpret pointed out is that because those behind the TV Everywhere initiative expect to significantly. They want to add more commercials to online TV. So now shows online include anywhere from a single 20-second ad break to 3 or 4 30-second spots. But TV Everywhere could potentially boost the number of commercial minutes per hour of TV to 18, which isn't that different from watching TV in a conventional way. And the last thing, I'm just going to go briefly because I think I'm running out of time.
You're out of time.
I am out of time?
Yeah, we really need to move on. Sorry.
All right. Well.
5 minutes over.
Okay. Well. Okay. Just one thing I wanted to point out is that as the paywall gets thicker, the privacy wall is going to get thinner, and the development right now seems to be to create apps that can monitor people's media consumption behavior, and also the way to use that data to target market the audience. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Melanie Conan, and I'm going to talk about the proliferation of mainstream television on and through online distribution platforms. So many sort of mainstream media reports about web series or web-based television often sort of emphasize that these projects will change television as we know it. And for example, Will Richmond said last month on Video News that what Hollywood A-listers like, for example, Tom Hanks partnering with Yahoo for a new series, and everybody else who's doing that have in common is that they're involved in original online video projects which are helping to upend the Hollywood ecosystem. And TV scholars have made similar assessments about the impact of internet on television. And for the most part, I feel that scholars ask, how will the internet change television? But I wonder, considering recent developments like, for example, the TV Everywhere initiative, which we just heard a lot about, and high-profile projects like David Lynch's House of Cards series for Netflix, if it's maybe not the other way around. So instead of asking how the internet has changed television, I want to ask, how does television incorporate the internet into its established routines of making and distributing programming? And specifically today, I want to talk about a web series called Husbands, which is produced by Jane Espenson, who is quite well known for her work in writing. So she's written for Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Battlestar Galactica and Game of Thrones and so on. And she partnered with an internet celebrity called Brad Cheeks-Bell to create Husbands. So it's kind of a convergence on the level of production where somebody who's an established TV professional reaches out to somebody who's established online to create this online sitcom. And Jane Espenson has described Husbands as a marriage equality sitcom. It was produced and promoted during the summer of 2011, and then it aired bi-weekly on husbandstheseries.com during the fall of 2011. It's set in a near future where same-sex marriage has been legalized across the country, and the plot revolves around Brady and Cheeks going to Las Vegas, getting really drunk, and then waking up the next day finding themselves married. And so let's watch just one very short 3-minute episode to get a better idea of what Husbands is kind of all about.
I love the robes in this hotel.
Oh my God, you're the kind of person who steals things from hotels.
You're not?
Not at all.
Oh,
This is fantastic. You can steal everything I can't.
I complete you.
Haley's late.
Oh, of course. With her, it's always Haley o'clock or Scotch o'clock. Oh, by the way, don't tell her we didn't plan on getting married.
Really? You don't trust your best friend to keep her mouth shut?
I've never seen her mouth shut. So, who's driving? And keep in mind, your answer reflects how you see our roles relative to each other in the journey of our married life.
I drive, you navigate?
Explain your answer.
I like to decide when we stop to pee.
Is your bladder going to try and control me and my life choices?
I don't see how.
My husband is going to drive.
OMG, you guys, I'm EHTW.
I don't even have the words.
Married? I read it online.
Yay.
Heard him and I'll slice you from nose to trinkets.
I like my trinkets.
Me too.
I mean, have you been planning this? Who proposed? What were your vows? Can I be your surrogate mother?
We have mothers.
She means she would keep...
I know.
Oh, okay, I wasn't
You
sure.
got it. Okay.
We'll get there.
This is great. I mean, you can teach Cheeks to stop daring the world not to like him, and he can teach you that you don't always have to control everything.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's sort of the savant thing she does sometimes. It doesn't last long.
You taste like colors.
See?
So this is Husbands. So just to give you a little bit of background to where this series fits into the web-based TV landscape. So there has been a concentrated effort of producing television for the web for about 5 to 6 years, when the increasing availability of broadband laid the technological foundation, and incidents like the 2007 WGA strike made the media industry look for new ways of producing and distributing content. So in response to this strike, several established industry professionals turned to web-based production and distribution to carry out programs or projects that, in their opinion, wouldn't have found an outlet on established television networks, because these projects, they felt, didn't fit into the programming that existed or constituted an explicit provocation to established models of making television. So, for example, Peter Hayaguchi founded an independent distribution company called Strike TV, which was supposed to provide high-quality television content online. And then you might have heard of a small show called The Guild, done by Felicia Day, which is probably the most well-known online series today. And it has sponsorship deals, it has multiple seasons, it's distributed via Xbox Live, so it's sort of it made it. And while Felicia Day wasn't really well known before she made The Guild, Joss Whedon, the producer of Buffy, Firefly, and Dollhouse, most definitely was. And Joss Whedon produced Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, a web-based musical, also in response to the WGA strike. And Whedon actually declared that, quote, "It is time for us to change the face of show business as we know it." So Jane Espenson and co-producer Brad Bell echo this kind of sentiment when they discuss their motivation for making Husbands. Espenson has emphasized that they chose to make a romantic comedy about a gay couple to, quote, make a point that there's an audience for this kind of subject matter. And she also said that she likes the speed and maneuverability of online production, being able to be very hands-on without having to guess what the powers above me might want. So even though Espenson positions Husbands outside of and in opposition to the norms of traditional television, I would argue that the series, in fact, replicates television norms in terms of production, promotion, content, and consumption. So the formal aspects of Husbands adhere to traditional filming and editing practices and don't really take advantage of web-based technology like HTML5, for example. In terms of promotion, Espenson and co-creator Brad Bell did a lot of promotion themselves via blog posts and tweets instead of handing off promotion to a marketing agency. And this and you can see, this is one of the tweets that Jane Espenson made as Husbands was airing. And so this kind of direct appeal via tweets and interaction with the audience is becoming increasingly common right now. And networks and channels pin a lot of hopes on so-called social television to maintain live viewing, for example. So many programs now have a dedicated Twitter hashtag, and others create special events around Twitter. So, for example, last fall, the actors of The Good Wife live tweeted one episode. And so social media is really drawn into the service of a cornerstone of television as a medium, namely watching a program as it airs. So while the platform used for promotion is new, the content of this promotional tweeting and blogging campaign was very traditional. So you got behind-the-scenes photos like this one, for example, and you got interviews and behind-the-scenes sort of insights. And they didn't really draw on any newer strategies in TV marketing, like, for example, transmedia storytelling. And the series even premiered during the network fall premiere season in late September, and is distributed via an established company, Blip TV, which is home to many web-based series. So this conventionality that exists on the level of production and promotion is echoed in its cultural representation and its content. Husbands is really beyond the regulation of the FCC and beyond network notes, but its take on gay life and marriage does not break with the conventions of LGBT representation on mainstream television. So the main characters are white, out and proud professionals, and as such inhabit exactly the type of queer visibility that television has promoted as a default mode of representation of LGBT Americans. And we can find the same kind of representations on Glee, for example, on Modern Family, and on older shows such as Brothers and Sisters, Queer as Folk, and even Will and Grace. And interestingly, the director of Husbands, Jeff Greenstein, used to work on Will and Grace. So one of the reasons for Husbands' compliance with these kind of televisual norms is that the terms of service agreements on Blip TV and YouTube don't allow explicit content. So for example, on Blip TV, the terms of service agreement states that the following content is prohibited: content involving nudity and content that is or may be deemed grossly offensive to the community. YouTube's community guidelines are more specific. So YouTube says YouTube is not for pornography or sexually explicit content. which kind of limits what you can show in web series, right? But more importantly, Espenson and Bell have expressed the hope of getting husbands onto television. So in a promotional interview with the Huffington Post, Jane Espenson explained that when we're done with filming, we will have a sellable pilot. And indeed, Husband's 11 episodes add up to about 22 minutes, which is the standard length of a sitcom episode on network TV. So, of course, if they hope to sell Husbands to network television, it makes sense for them to produce something that is really similar to the LGBT content that has been successful on network TV. So the conventional norms of production, distribution, and representation evident in Husbands enable a really easy consumption of the series. Specifically, the by now familiar mode of watching TV via streaming video works in conjunction with these established cultural tropes and narrative structures to make Husbands accessible to viewers. So it's accessible easily because it's on streaming video platforms that we are all familiar with, and it's accessible sort of on a cultural level because it repeats the same kind of tropes that television has fed us about LGBT characters for about 2 decades now. So in other words, watching a traditional sitcom about a white gay couple via streaming video slots comfortably into the media consumption habits of many viewers. So to sum up, contrary to the notion that web-based television breaks with the norms of television, viewers of Husbands do not have to reorient their engagement with television or their understanding of television as a medium. Indeed, Husbands' conventionality counters the notion that the digital revolutionizes television. Rather, I would say web-based projects like Husbands demonstrate that television has begun to integrate the digital into its own norms. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Matt Cohen, and I'm from the University of Iowa. I'm a visiting professor there, and I'm happy to be here. It's actually 10 degrees warmer here, which is a good thing. My paper is called The Difficulty of Endorsing the Television Anywhere, Anytime campaign, the case of TimeWarner and the TimeWarner Cable TV app. Now, in the next 8 to 10 minutes, what I'm going to be doing is I'll be talking a little bit about my previous research. Before this particular research, I was actually studying the Motion Picture Association of America and what they were doing with film in the sort of Film Anywhere, Anytime campaign. And at the same time, they were trying to control, the intellectual properties. They were enforcing the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So that was my dissertation focus, and I'm seeing similarities in the rhetoric between the two campaigns. So I'll be talking a little bit about that. Then I'll talk about the Time Warner case itself. And then I want to briefly discuss the definition of post-network, which I think we need to reconsider in this media anywhere, anytime campaign with the proliferation of devices, and specifically intellectual property concerns, which I don't think has been hit upon enough. So when you're looking at my title of the paper, you might think that I'm some sort of technological curmudgeon, and I'm not. In fact, I love technology. I mean, I buy a lot of technology. I have all sorts of consoles underneath my television set, and I will buy and sell technology online, these devices, and get new devices. And so I am in I do not mean to rain on the campaign of the Media Anywhere, Anytime campaign. I'm just simply, as I said, cautious of the rhetoric. And if we go back to, about 5 or 6 years ago, Dan Glickman, who was president of the MPAA at the time, he had a press conference, and he said, the film industry is behind this Film Anywhere, Anytime campaign. And because we want consumers, to have access to these great films. And he was trying to put a more friendly face on the piracy campaign as opposed to his predecessor, Jack Valenti, if you remember. Jack Valenti, was known for his fiery rhetoric against consumers. Now, as he was talking about this Film Anywhere, Anytime campaign, he actually called digital rights management a consumer enabling tool. I mean, can you imagine? And so when I read this, I cringed. And, so again, this rhetoric makes me cringe because I know there's not a lot of truth to it. And so we need to examine this. And throughout my dissertation, I, interviewed a lot of people involved with the Hollywood film industry. My argument in my dissertation was that Hollywood has relationships with the content producers, with the hardware manufacturers, and a bevy of lawyers to enforce content. And what this is called, it's called what Tarleton Gillespie calls the trusted system. And so the MPA has all of these relationships, but at the same time is promoting film heavily. So I interviewed one of the vice presidents of the Motion Picture Association of that time, and he was also head of legal strategy. And he said, it was very difficult to promote this Film Anywhere, Anytime campaign because at the same time, the rules around intellectual properties were being rewritten to meet the needs of the industry. And we failed. The motion picture industry failed to do what they set out to do. And I think the same thing is going on here with this Television Anywhere, Anytime campaign. I think eventually the rules will be rewritten and there will be more media and more devices to access content, but media is certainly not free, and it won't be free anytime soon. So I want to talk about the case of TimeWarner and the TimeWarner cable TV application. Of course, it was mentioned in a previous presentation that TimeWarner Cable, they debuted this TimeWarner Cable TV app in March of last year. Now, after 3 days that it was in the Apple Store, TimeWarner was threatened with 3 lawsuits. The 3 lawsuits came from 20th Century Fox, from Viacom, and from the Discovery Network. And so TimeWarner, as they should have, they took the application out of the Apple Store, and they had conversations with all of these media companies, these cable companies, cable broadcasters, and eventually the application was brought back into the Apple the iTunes Store, and it's available for people to download. Now, with the exception of Viacom, Viacom did not come to an agreement with TimeWarner. And so they're still sitting on the sidelines, and I'm not really sure ultimately what Viacom is going to do. They simply want more money, because legally you understand the issue is that when the broadcasting of media content goes beyond the home, then media companies want to be paid for that. And so this is all battles over money and over profits. And so we'll see what happens. Now, TimeWarner realized, though, that there was a legal loophole they could exploit as they were having this battle with Viacom. And so what they did was they actually came up with this idea of offering a $300 rebate to consumers when they buy a Sling box. I mean, isn't that clever? It's very clever. And the Sling box, I think, actually allowed people to watch Viacom content. And to my knowledge, they were able to watch that content even beyond the home. And the Sling box was able to perform to its utmost capacity. So that's interesting. So as I mentioned, TimeWarner found that legal loophole, and we'll see what happens with Viacom. So in this era of media anywhere, anytime, I've talked about these legal issues going on and these legal battles. And we have this term to describe the era in which we're in right now, right? And it's called post-network. The post-network era is supposed to describe this sort of erosion of control that the media companies, that the broadcasters have with consumers. The consumers have more power, right, because the consumers aren't locked into television schedules and they can watch this media anywhere they please. But what I'm thinking is that with this post-network term, we need to be talking not only about the consumer and the opportunities that they have with more devices and more content, but we also need to be talking about the tension that is going on between the broadcasters and their content, right? And we've seen a lot of discussions. There have been some discussions here even today at this particular conference about intellectual property concerns. But I think that it's in this post-network era, we're going to see more and more lawsuits because, you know, of all the content that's available. And I talked about the Dan Glickman comment before when he talked about the film being anywhere, anytime, and his grimace. Well, I think you know, companies are continuing to grimace, you know, as they're begrudgingly offering their content everywhere, and so we need to pay attention to that. So, thank you very much. I appreciate your attention today.
I'm Michael Holmes. I'm from the Center for Media Design at Ball State University. The big V plus up there is for Viewing Plus, which is our initiative for everything having to do with interactive television, both cable-based and on the second screen. It consists mainly of collaborative efforts, interdepartmental, interdisciplinary groups of faculty and students working on application, ideation, design, development, and then the Center for Media Design doing user experience testing around them. I'm here today to talk about second screen apps. You heard a brief mention from our first presenter about second screen apps. This is a somewhat closer look at those apps, which of course meld TV and the mobile device. The 35,000 hours of observational research of consumer exposure to media that we've done in the Center for Media Design in the last 7 years shows that about 30% of the time when you're watching television, you're exposed to some other medium at the same time. And what's becoming increasingly of concern to the industry is the fact that increasingly that is the mobile screen in your hands, which is not the second screen, because as was pointed out, that field of view is bigger than your television, and it's the one in your hands, and it's interactive. It's the first screen. So they're trying to co-opt that mobile screen by putting relevant content, not just let's show the television program on the second screen, but let's provide companion content, often synchronized to the show so that you watch in real time rather than time shift, to enhance your experience of the program and actually use that device to increase your engagement rather than reduce your engagement, and therefore preserve the value of your eyeballs to advertisers. Because as was mentioned, it's all about the money. Nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, we're very early in that process and taking some stumbling steps. And the question is, will these second screen companion apps ultimately enhance or distract? And what content and design practices will influence the answer to that question? So this is a study of visual attention. And I firmly believe that this particular image from the Clockwork Orange should be in just part of any presentation on eye tracking. But note Goldhaber's famous assertion, the currency of the new economy won't be money, but it's attention, because the money follows the attention. So, there's some cognitive science behind what the content providers are trying to do. And that's the fact that we have parallel processing and memory centers for visual and audio processing. Dual processing theory tells us that if we have related content, visually and auditorily, oral content, we have better understanding and better retention. But you have interference and cognitive overload if the content is too divergent. So we're running a risk by adding not only a second screen, but additional content, and whether or not that's going to impact our cognitive processing. So it's a very interesting challenge. So what we wanted to do was to ask some very preliminary research questions. because very little's been done in this area in the lab. How is viewer attention, visual attention, distributed between the television screen and now this companion app that you have in your hands and off screen? Because even when we're deeply engaged in a program, we look off screen. And do those patterns of visual attention vary across drama and documentary genres? Because other research shows that the level of cognitive engagement that's necessary varies across television genres. For example, it takes only about 1% of your mind to watch football, right? We had the Super Bowl in Indianapolis, and believe me, my 1% was there. So what we looked at were two programs with synchronized companion apps. These are applications that run on the iPad. They use an embedded audio watermark in the programming to trigger interactive content on the app. That's typically companion information, trivia questions, polls, and in the case of From the Edge with Peter Lick, the photographs that he's taking in the show, although for some reason they send them to you in low res. So it's actually lower quality than what you're seeing on the television screen. Grey's Anatomy and Peter Lick, two programs that we chose because unlike many of these programs, the audio watermarks work off a DVR. It's a simple experimental design. We've got 20 participants, ages 18 to 56, pretty close to that target audience for television. 10 men, 10 women. Now, they're familiar with iOS and Android interfaces, so the touch screen, the multi-touch screen is not an issue for them. They're program viewers, but they're not hardcore fans of these two programs, and they hadn't seen the particular episodes that we were using. We rotated program order and episodes in 2 sessions for each viewer, and we had them view the program, and we used a head-mounted eye-tracking system to track their point of gaze. We're not concerned about where they're looking in the screen in this particular study, just whether they're looking at the television screen or whether they're looking at the mobile screen. And we also used recall measures for content after each session. All right, the ideal setup would look something like this. This is our media lab on the edge of campus. It's a nice little facility. We have a closed-loop cable head end so we can deploy EBIF-based interactive cable applications. We have a nice eye-tracking setup. As you can tell, it kind of looks like a student rental. That's because it used to be before the university bought it. Traditional Midwestern furniture, which means the furniture is bigger than your car. The ideal setup would be something as normal as this, but unfortunately, in practice, we have to immobilize the tablet so it's a stable scene plane to the eye tracker. So that's one thing that we're working on improving in the future. And of course, all the equipment is behind the viewer. The equipment itself is very unobtrusive. People forget they have it on. You know, they reach up to scratch their nose and they hit the equipment, or the session's over and they'll stand up to leave and then realize they've got cables dangling off the equipment. It's really gotten a lot better over the last 10 years. All right. So our data from this is we have their point of gaze, whether it's on the television screen, on the mobile screen, or off screen at 60 hertz. We have their gaze duration between screen switching. We're interested in how long you're looking at the television before you look at the tablet and vice versa, or off screen. We align that sequential data with the program structure information. In other words, the programs alternate between program content and ad pods, and there's also a structure of interactive pushes to the tablet that are triggered by the audio watermark. And then we also, as I mentioned, have the program and ad content recall measures. Interesting and unexpected result. Because we're dealing here with two different genres, prior research says different cognitive engagement with these different genres, and we're dealing with a 1-hour show, which is Grey's Anatomy, and a half-hour show, which is From the Edge with Peter Lick. And what we found was an amazing, uncanny consistency across these conditions, where a little over 60% of gaze time is on the television, about 30% of gaze time is on the tablet, and the rest, approximately 7%, elsewhere. So this was our first surprise. We didn't know what the differences would be, but we thought there would be differences. I mean, this is so close, why even bother doing any statistical analysis? You know it's going to hold up. But there was a bigger surprise. prior television eye tracking research tells us that when people are watching television, the mean gaze time on the television screens is about 2 seconds. The modal time is quite a bit larger. It's 7 seconds. And that's because out there in the long tail is a bump of 10, 15, 20-second gazes where you're really into that screen. What we found in our research is that those outliers of long gazes just completely went away. And that dropped our mean gaze to about 1.5 seconds. That was just very unexpected. What happened was, as I mentioned, the long gazes go away because there's a monitoring pattern of quick glances back and forth between the screens, which we really have to explore in the long term, whether that's from the novelty effect, because people haven't had much experience with the second screen companion apps yet, or whether it's just, I don't want to miss anything, even though there's an audio signal from the companion app when there's an interactive push. So that was very unexpected. Gazes on the tablet were a little bit shorter. Gazes off screen are very short because that tends to be, because you're not in your own home. You're in essentially somebody else's home. So you're not watching the kids or going into the kitchen. But they're also short because part of the off-screen area is that little area between in your field of view between the tablet and the television. So as you look back and forth, you're getting very, very rapid paths over an off-screen area. So we were surprised by that result as well. And it's a much more active monitoring. To look at prior television viewing research, gazes like this were called very active monitoring. All right, so let's look at how that unfolds over time. This is a little confusing at first, so let me briefly explain it. Essentially what we have from left to right is the duration of the program, and you can see the timestamps for the minutes there at the bottom. Where you see a dark gray bar underneath the colored portion of the chart, that's the onset of an interactive push. So they're really taking advantage of that second screen. They're hammering interactive pushes at you. The lighter gray bars are ad pods, very traditional ad pod structure. And in this particular program, every ad pod also includes, at its very beginning, an interactive push to the tablet. So what you see in those spikes are, for the people watching this particular episode of Grey's Anatomy, which is 10 people, for each second, the average distribution of gaze time between the television off-screen and the tablet, where the blue is off-screen, the tan is the television, and the green is time on the tablet. And you'll note that, for example, whenever we get an interactive push, which again, there's an audio trigger for that as well, or an audio reminder, you see eyes to the tablet. You can see those spikes of visual attention, more time being spent on the tablet in those seconds. Now, when you look at the ad pods, they all start with the interactive push, so you see that spike of attention down to the tablet at the onset of the ad pod. But something else happened that we weren't really expecting. We thought, in classic ad avoidance lingo, I've never liked the term ad avoidance. I like to think about it as opportunity cost. There's no opportunity cost to missing an ad, except when you're watching the Super Bowl, which is why everybody watches the Super Bowl ads, because it's the only first time you can see that ad with your friends. But nevertheless, we thought that eyes would stay with the tablet for the bulk of the ad pod. And what you can see there is there's a general trend. Yes, attention goes to the tablet with the interactive push and the start of the ad pod, but by the end of the ad pod, before the end of the ad pod, a lot of the visual attention is back on the television screen. So the notion that the second screen app was going to take visual attention away from the ads on the television, which was just our assumption, did not hold true. You see a similar pattern in the other episode. Again, very similar. Spike down with every interactive push and at the start of every ad pod. And generally, although in some cases a little bit flatter, you see the return of visual attention to the television pretty quickly after the onset of the ad pod. A little bit different from the Edge with Peter Lick. This is episode A. Note the ad pods do not have interactive pushes, but nevertheless we do see once again the attention spikes with all the interactive pushes, and it's a flatter and more varied pattern. We're not quite sure why this is, except From the Edge with Peter Lick did include a lot more program promotions rather than commercials. So it may be a difference between promos and commercials. Similar pattern in the other episode. Right. Again, remarkable consistency in the patterning. So, well, let's unpack program versus iPod or ad pod. And I'm not even an Apple fanboy. Program versus ad pod. And you can see that it's pretty consistent that, yes, during the ad pods, you do have more attention to the tablet, but when you average it across the whole ad pod, it's not that much. It's only a few percentage points more. But the other thing that was interesting here, again, is the consistency across the two programs and the episodes of the two programs. So, let me stop one moment there. So we think that what's going on here, and again, this is very exploratory research, is that what's really driving attention here, that's so the attention is so similar across the two programs, is they're really very similar in what percentage of the program includes interactive onsets. We didn't take the whole interactive because a lot of these, the interactive opportunity remains on screen once it appears on the tablets. We just take the first 10 seconds. So they're similar in how much of an opportunity there is for new interactive pushes, and they're very similar because of television conventions in their ad pod structures. So that is really what's driving that similarity. All right, so does this matter? We thought, well, let's take a look at recall for content. It's one of the few measures of engagement that we have. Engagement's a really slippery term. So we looked at ad recall. An average of 3.2 ad brands were recalled. Prompted recall, they got 3.1 of 4 answers correct, so pretty good response there. Program content recall, we only did prompted for that due to methodological challenges. Got most of the answers correct. But once again, no differences between the programs. Now, we don't have a control condition. That's in a study that we're doing right now of people without the app. So what we did is we did a split on high attention to the tablet and low attention to the tablet within our sample, and there's no difference. So visual attention was unrelated, amount of visual attention was unrelated to recall. So, wrapping up, second screen apps captured attention even outside of the interactive pushers. There's always somebody spending some attention on the app. They captured but did not keep attention during the ad pods, but it's greatest during the combination of the onset of interactive pushes and with ad pods. We found fundamental viewing patterns, gaze patterns, to be quite different from what's been found in prior literature, but no impact on content recall. So what are we going to do? Remember QR codes? Thought I'd throw one in there to be retro. So we have our own screenshots app, which can be skinned for different things, but right now it's skinned for Big Bang Theory. And it includes a social media feed, which pretty much all of these apps are going to have in the future. Because what they're trying to do is to keep you from using your other Twitter client, because that'll take you away from the program. We're including a control group without an app, and we're doing data alignment not only with program versus ad pod, but we're going to look at alignment with particular dramatic events in the content and with soundtrack cues in the television content. So we're actually recruiting for that study right now and should be collecting data over the next 2 or 3 weeks. If you want more information, you can find out about us at researchcmd.com. Thank you.
If I could have the panel come up and grab the stage. We'll take questions and discussion for about 12-15 minutes. It is a hot mic, so hold it about as far from you as I'm holding it from me. I will run around the room like Jerry Springer, pass you the microphone, say your name, where you're from, and speak your question into the mic so we can get it on the webcast. Hands?
Mikili. Yeah, Mikili, okay. It's weird to hear your own voice. Mikili, Suffolk University. I actually have a question for Jin Lee. Yes, actually, I would like to hear a little bit more about the Bloomberg application.
What happened to why is allowing live content for free? It's not working? Yeah. It's just me not wanting to hit my mouth there. Okay, so the reason why Bloomberg decided to have its live feed for free is because currently Bloomberg is at a battle with Comcast at FCC because its argument is that Comcast is not fulfilling the conditions that the FCC the conditions that FCC laid out for them when they allowed merger with NBC Universal. And Bloomberg, I mean, it's a widely distributed network, but it's still, when it comes to ratings or it comes to reputation, is still behind CNBC, which is owned by Comcast. And Bloomberg is arguing that in the Comcast cable operating system, that is not giving, it's giving CNBC a more advantaged channel than Bloomberg, and Bloomberg's like, well, we're going to try to find a way to make more people watch our network, and that's why they decided to have their live feed for free. And Comcast is not happy about it because Comcast is one of the leading companies of the TV Everywhere initiative. I don't know if did it answer your question? Okay.
Hi, yeah, I'm Erin Koppel-Smith from Denison University. I have a question for Melanie. I thought your talk was really interesting, and I kept thinking about, when we say web TV, that indicates that there's something particularly television-y about it, right? And I thought that your talk did a really good job of sort of getting at this is what are the hallmarks of television, actually, and that's how we know it's web TV as opposed to something else. So I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit more about what it is about television that even when it's on the web, we still recognize and call it television, or is it just a habit? It's not a film, so we just call it web TV. I'm just curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think for me it's mainly that just in terms of format and narrative structure and content and representation, Husbands or other web series really replicate the norms of traditional television, so that's how we identify it as TV because, for example, even though the individual episodes of Husbands were 2 to 3 minutes, which is more the length for web-based video, together they make 22 minutes, very calculated number of minutes, so that it would be one episode of TV. Then the way it's filmed is traditional, sort of single cam, sitcom style. And as I said, the cultural representation totally ties into the LGBT representations we've had over the last 2 decades. And so I think all these pieces together then form television in the mind of the viewer. And what was really interesting to me is, for example, Jane Espenson has said that she didn't really know anything about web-based TV, and everything web-related was sort of done by Brad Bell, who was her co-producer, who brought in sort of the internet expertise. So she clearly, as sort of the writer or the co-writer, completely saw this and conceptualized it as traditional television. The only difference was that it was not broadcast, it was online.
So just a
a follow-up question. Louisa Stein from Middlebury College. So your sort of premise was that we're asking we're asking the wrong question or maybe a question that we should move on from how has the internet changed television, rather how is television using the internet but replicating its own norms. But I'm wondering what then is the impact of that replication on digital media? Like, are there modes of narrative media on the web that are being foreclosed beyond these particular instances of these web series? So therefore, is the television changing the internet?
Right. Yeah, I think, I think you're absolutely right, and particularly. I see this conflict between how even the people who make web-based television talk about it. They see it as this opportunity to really move away from traditional TV and its constraints, and they try to explore the web as this alternative, and you can do new things, you can experiment. But then what ends up happening a lot of the time is not experimentation, but it's the replication of televisional norms. And so then maybe, especially in high-profile projects like Husbands, if we identify those with all the possibilities that web-based video, web-based television can have, it closes out other audience-created forms of web-based television or really independent, non-commercial productions that we might then not even consider as web-based TV because these really famous projects have already formed a notion for us what web-based television is. And maybe that is then all we can imagine under web-based television, which then means it's not moving outside of what we know of TV, but just replicates it once more.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Myers from the College of Mount St. Vincent. That sort of brings up a question now I have from Melanie about the distribution of these episodes. I usually assign my students to go out and find webisodes, and they really don't want to, which brings up other questions about how people find this stuff. So it'd be interesting if you could comment on how viewers are finding those episodes. But I actually had a question for Michael, which is that you were working with an app that was connected to the program.
Yes, these are synchronized apps.
But my question is, wouldn't the majority of people using multiple screens be doing something else, like looking at their Facebook feed and their Twitter feed? How successful would these apps actually possibly be? Because so many people are being habituated to using other kinds of materials while they're watching television.
Well, what the content providers hope is to counteract that tendency by giving you compelling content on the second screen. Although I'd have to say, from everything except from of course, the one that we developed ourselves, is a remarkable disappointments. And I think that 2 to 3 years from now, there'll be history. And what we'll see instead are the various kinds of applications that Jin Lee talked about. But also, if you look at ZBox in the UK, the other problem is that you have to invest staff resources and production resources to create the second screen content. So what ZBox does in the UK is it taps the universe of related content that's out there on the web, and it uses very sophisticated pattern matching to figure out what's going on in any program and to feed you links to the other content. So quite frankly, I think that consumers will not adopt these apps. The reason why there was such a flurry over them a year ago is because interactive television in the United States, as one industry pundit has put it, it's a Loch Ness monster. Somebody saw it once in the UK. We've been talking about it ever since. We can never get our hands on it because of the complications of our cable infrastructure and the set-top box system that we have. So this was seen as an opportunity to sidestep that, put rich interactivity in place without waiting for the cable systems.
How people find these kind of web series? I think that is one of the major problems with web-based television. So, for example, in the case of Husbands, it was attached to 2 people who were famous, either on TV and online, and both Jane Espenson and Brad Bell are very active on Twitter. And I follow Jane Espenson just because I like her work. So, of course, I knew that she was doing husbands because she was tweeting relentlessly about it last summer. And it was really hard to escape, she would always include the link to the website, and so you kind of knew it. And so both of them have a lot of followers, and then from there, I think it spreads. But for people who don't start with this kind of visibility in either television or in social media, I think it's much harder to, have an audience.
This really is very hot. This question's for Matt. You gestured at the end to suggesting that we should rethink what we mean by post-network television.
Right.
And I just wanted to know more about your thoughts on that, especially since my understanding of post-network television isn't so much about conglomerates losing power, but more about them having to diversify both their production and distribution strategies in the face of competition and technologies. But, yeah.
Right. So I think that the term post-network, and again, scholars have said that they don't mean to say that networks don't matter, and that's not what I'm saying. Networks, but what I'm saying is that in this day and age of lawsuits and these battles over content because of the proliferation of hardware, that to me networks matter more now than ever because these properties mean so much to them, and all you have to do is go on Hulu and you'll see the networks. You'll see you'll see the NBC and all of this branded entertainment. So brands and networks matter more, I think, now because of this era. Okay.
Sorry, I just want to add a little comment to that. I'm Mark Stewart from the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and I keep on bringing up a non-North American context because that's what I come from. What I find interesting, just as a comment to that last comment you made, is that, for instance, when these shows screen outside North America, none of that branding exists. We don't know whether it's an NBC or an ABC or a Fox program. That's so all that context gets completely removed outside the North American context.
That's fascinating.
What that means, I don't know. I haven't thought about that enough. But I just sort of wanted to raise that as a point that there is so much effort put into this branding, but then again, we don't have access to Hulu outside North America. We don't have access to Netflix, and so that branding is completely obscured, and instead shows, I guess, screen on their merit.
No, I think I'm glad you brought up that the cultural specific. I mean, that's important to note, and we all know. I mean, intellectual property and these kinds of current concerns are coming from the West and moving to other places, and so you make a good point.
We have time for one more.
I'd just like to extend the New Zealand comment that it's not just outside North America, but it's specifically outside the U.S. In Canada, the network shows appear on a variety of channels. ABC, CBS, NBC might be on the same channel. They're scattered around. So the branding doesn't work there, and we, too, don't get Hulu and many of the other concerns that have been discussed here. So that's just a little clarification and extension of the caution.
Any final thoughts from the panel?